the two worlds you live in. What if the real reason your manifestation fails has nothing to do with the universe and everything to do with which world you're living in? Most people think reality is one place. What happens out there? The bills, the messages, the losses, the delays, the uncertainty. But there are actually two worlds running at the same time: the external world of events and the internal world of your emotional and vibrational state. Here's the open loop most people miss. External chaos is not the problem. The problem is leakage. When an event crosses the border and occupies your inner world like an invading force, that's when your frequency collapses, your perception narrows, and your decisions become reactive. And then you call it bad luck. So let me ask you something uncomfortable. When life hits you, do you observe it as a fact, or do you absorb it as an identity? Because the moment you merge with the event, you stop co-creating and start surviving. And survival has its own vibration: predictable, repetitive, and self-confirming. In the next topic, I'll show you the single skill that separates calm creators from emotional prisoners. Emotional collapse is not intelligence. Have you ever noticed how two people can face the same crisis, yet only one of them truly falls apart? This is where most people misunderstand emotional intelligence. They think strength means denying pain, suppressing fear, or pretending everything is fine. That's not intelligence. That's emotional debt. True intelligence is something far more precise: the ability to experience impact without collapsing internally. Pain can arise. Shock can appear. Even grief has a place. But collapse is optional. Collapse happens when the external event hijacks your internal command center. Here's the crucial distinction: emotions are signals, not rulers. When they take control, your vibration drops into reaction mode. Your nervous system tightens. Your perception shrinks. And suddenly, every option looks like a threat. From that state, you don't co-create, you repeat. This is why quantum creation is not about positive thinking. It's about emotional non-collapse. When you remain internally stable, even under pressure, your frequency stays coherent. And coherence is power. It keeps your field open to solutions you literally cannot see while panicking. In the next topic, I'll show you the only two intelligent responses to any problem, and why everything else is self-sabotage. If this perspective is already shifting how you see reality, like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps this message reach the people who need it most. The only two intelligent responses to any problem. What if every problem in your life had only two possible intelligent responses, and everything else was emotional noise? This idea alone can collapse anxiety in seconds, because confusion is what drains your power. Clarity restores it. Whenever a challenge appears, ask yourself one decisive question: can something be done about this right now? If the answer is yes, then action is required, but not frantic action. Calm, precise, grounded action. Panic scrambles perception. Urgency narrows intelligence. Only calm allows you to see the correct move instead of 10 wrong ones. But here's where most people fail the test. If the answer is no, if nothing can be done immediately, then resistance becomes self-inflicted suffering. Complaining, ruminating, and replaying scenarios do not create solutions. They only poison your internal field. In this case, acceptance and adaptation are not weakness. They are the highest form of intelligence. Acceptance does not mean liking the situation. It means stopping the internal war. And the moment the war ends, your energy stops leaking. From that neutral state, perception expands. Options emerge. Timing aligns. In the next topic, I'll show you why lightness, not control, is the hidden virtue behind emotional mastery and quantum coherence. Lightness is a form of power. What if the reason life feels so heavy isn't the problems themselves, but the way seriously you carry them inside? Most people believe intensity equals commitment, that seriousness proves responsibility. But in reality, excessive seriousness creates rigidity, and rigidity is the fastest path to internal collapse. Lightness is not irresponsibility. It is flexibility. It is the ability to stay mentally and emotionally mobile when circumstances try to harden you. When you take life and yourself too seriously, your inner world tightens. Humor disappears. Perspective narrows. And your vibration sinks into contraction. Here's the paradox. The people who solve problems most effectively are rarely the most tense. They are the ones who can step back, breathe, and see the situation without becoming it. Lightness creates space, and space restores intelligence. From a quantum perspective, lightness keeps your field open. Heavy emotional charge creates fixation. Fixation collapses probability into repetition. That's why people who struggle hard often keep recreating the same obstacles. They are locked into the same vibrational posture. Lightness, on the other hand, introduces fluidity. It allows you to move with events instead of against them. And when you stop fighting reality internally, reality starts responding differently. In the next topic, I'll introduce neutrality, the skill that prevents problems from hijacking your inner state, no matter how chaotic life becomes. Neutrality, the skill that changes everything. What if the real work of personal evolution isn't eliminating problems, but preventing them from living inside you? Problems will always appear. That's not a flaw in life. It's a feature of growth. The question is not what happens to you, but where it happens. Neutrality is the ability to let events remain external. It is the mental filter that stops facts from turning into identities. When something goes wrong, most people don't just experience an event, they become it. This is happening silently turns into this is who I am now. And that is where suffering begins. Neutrality doesn't mean indifference. It means clarity. You observe the situation as data, not as a personal verdict. The moment you do that, your internal field stabilizes. And a stable field is magnetic. It attracts resolution instead of resistance. From the standpoint of co-creation, neutrality keeps your vibration coherent. Emotional overreaction scrambles the signal you send into the field. Neutral observation refines it. You stop amplifying the problem and start creating space for a different outcome. In the next topic, I'll break down the 4 internal pillars that shape your personal vibration and why mastering them gives you control regardless of external circumstances. The 4 pillars that shape your reality. What if your reality is not shaped by luck, effort, or intention, but by 4 internal forces you are using every day, whether you realize it or not? Your personal vibration is not random. It is structured. And it is built on 4 pillars: beliefs, emotions, communication, and actions. Beliefs define how you interpret the world. They decide what feels possible or impossible before you ever act. Emotions give those beliefs energetic charge. They are the frequency your system broadcasts. Communication, both internal and external, translates that frequency into signals. And actions materialize the signal into physical form. Here's the key insight. All 4 pillars are internal. They are not controlled by governments, markets, or other people. Even when external circumstances are chaotic, these pillars remain adjustable. That's where real power lives. When these 4 pillars are aligned, your vibrational field becomes coherent. Coherence creates attraction. Opportunities feel natural instead of forced. When the pillars contradict each other, the field becomes noisy and manifestation fails, not because the universe says no, but because the signal is distorted. In the next topic, I'll explain why communication is the most powerful and most neglected pillar of all, and how it directly regulates your emotional state. Communication controls your vibration. What if the fastest way to change your emotional state had nothing to do with thinking differently, but with how you communicate? Most people underestimate this pillar because they believe communication is only about words spoken out loud. In reality, communication is the command system of your inner world. Every sentence you repeat internally shapes your emotional chemistry. Your nervous system listens, your subconscious obeys, and your vibrational field adjusts in real time. This is why two people can hold the same belief intellectually, yet experience completely different realities. Their internal dialogue is not the same. Communication regulates emotion more directly than thought alone. Thoughts can linger. Words instruct. When you describe your life as a battle, your body prepares for war. When you speak in terms of observation, learning, or transition, your system stays open and adaptive. There's also an external dimension. The way you speak to others reinforces how you speak to yourself. Tone, posture, and emotional charge matter more than content. And beyond that, there is a transcendent layer, how you communicate with life itself through expectation, trust, and interpretation of events. In the next topic, I'll show you how internal communication can either trap you in emotional loops or become the tool that restores neutrality and power. The inner dialogue that shapes your fate. Have you ever noticed that your life seems to echo the way you speak to yourself when no one is listening? This is not coincidence. Your inner dialogue is not background noise, it is programming. It continuously instructs your subconscious how to interpret reality and what outcomes to expect. Most people believe they are reacting to life, but in truth, they are reacting to their own internal narration about life. A single event happens outside. Inside, it multiplies into stories, judgments, predictions, and conclusions. And those conclusions quietly become commands. Here is the critical distinction. Your inner voice does not describe reality, it selects it. When your self-talk is filled with urgency, blame, or catastrophizing, your nervous system locks into survival mode. In that state, perception narrows. You miss opportunities that were always there simply because your field cannot register them. Conscious internal communication changes this instantly. When you learn to observe your inner dialogue instead of obeying it, neutrality returns. The emotional charge softens. And once the charge dissolves, your vibration rises naturally, without forcing positivity. In the next topic, you'll learn how to strengthen internal communication through awareness, intuition, and the body, so your inner world becomes an ally instead of an enemy. Listening to the body and reclaiming inner authority. What if your body has been giving you guidance this entire time, but you were trained to ignore it? Most people try to manage their inner world exclusively through the mind, yet the body is the first place where emotional truth appears. Tension, fatigue, tightness, restlessness. These are not inconveniences. They are messages. Strengthening internal communication begins with awareness. Awareness means noticing what happens before emotional collapse, not after. The body always signals first. A shallow breath, a clenched jaw, a subtle contraction in the chest. These signals tell you that an external event is crossing the border into your inner world. Intuition lives here, not as mystical insight, but as immediate, nonverbal information. When you listen to the body, you intercept emotional reactions before they turn into stories. This is how neutrality is maintained in real time. Inner authority is restored the moment you stop outsourcing interpretation to fear-based thoughts. Instead of asking, "What does this mean about me?" you ask, "What is actually happening right now?" That single shift dissolves identification. In the next topic, I'll explain why emotional mastery is not suppression but intelligent guidance, and how this changes your entire relationship with power. Emotional mastery is guidance, not suppression. What if the emotions you're trying to control are not the problem, but the way you relate to them is? Many people confuse emotional mastery with emotional suppression. They try to push feelings down, override them with logic, or mask them with forced positivity. That approach always backfires. Emotions are signals. They indicate alignment or misalignment between your inner state and what you are experiencing. Suppressing them cuts off information. Letting them rule you hands over authority. Mastery lives in the middle, guiding emotion instead of being dragged by it. When an emotion arises, the question is not, "How do I get rid of this?" but, "What is this emotion asking me to notice?" Fear may signal uncertainty. Anger may signal a violated boundary. Sadness may signal attachment. When you listen without collapsing, the signal completes its cycle and dissolves naturally. From a quantum perspective, emotional guidance keeps your field coherent. Suppression creates internal conflict. Overreaction creates distortion. Guidance creates flow. And flow is where power returns. In the next topic, I'll show you how emotional intelligence is symbolized not by force, but by taming inner instincts with awareness and grace. Power without force. What if real power has nothing to do with control and everything to do with awareness? Most people try to dominate their inner world the same way they try to dominate the external one, through force, resistance, and pressure. But force creates opposition, and opposition creates exhaustion. Emotional intelligence works differently. It does not crush instincts, it refines them. Imagine a powerful animal, not chained, not beaten, but calm because it trusts the one guiding it. This is how awareness relates to emotion. You don't fight the instinct, you lead it. When awareness is present, impulses lose their urgency. Reactions slow down. Space appears between stimulus and response. And in that space, choice returns. That choice is where sovereignty lives. Force-based control keeps you tense. Awareness-based guidance keeps you fluid. Fluidity allows adaptation. Adaptation keeps your vibration responsive instead of rigid. And rigidity is always the precursor to collapse. This is why people who appear calm in chaos are not emotionally numb, they are emotionally literate. They understand their inner landscape well enough to navigate it without violence. In the next topic, I'll explain why victimhood freezes reality and how taking responsibility for the inner world restores momentum and movement. Why victimhood freezes reality. Have you ever wondered why some people feel stuck for years, even though they are constantly working on themselves? The answer often has nothing to do with effort and everything to do with position. Victimhood is not an emotion, it is a stance. And it is the most immobilizing stance a person can take. When you see yourself as a victim of circumstances, responsibility for your inner world is unconsciously handed over to the outside. Your emotional state becomes conditional. Your vibration waits for permission. And waiting is vibrational paralysis. This does not mean denying injustice, loss, or difficulty. It means recognizing a precise boundary. You may not control events, but you are always responsible for how those events live inside you. The moment you reclaim that responsibility, movement returns. Energy flows again. From the perspective of co-creation, victimhood collapses the field. It signals powerlessness. Responsibility restores signal strength. It tells reality, I am still the operator of my inner state. And reality responds accordingly. Momentum is not created by fighting circumstances. It is created by refusing to let circumstances define your internal position. In the next topic, I'll show you how life becomes lighter and more fluid the moment external events lose authority over your inner state. When the outside loses its power over you. What changes when external events no longer dictate how you feel inside? The answer is subtle at first, but profound over time. Life does not suddenly become problem-free. Challenges still arise. Loss still happens. Uncertainty still exists. But something essential shifts. The problems stop occupying the center of your inner world. When external events lose authority over your internal state, your energy stops leaking. You no longer wake up emotionally hijacked by news, messages, or memories. Your baseline stabilizes. And from that stability, clarity emerges. This is where life begins to feel lighter, not because circumstances improved, but because you are no longer collapsing into them. Decisions become cleaner, reactions soften, and creativity returns because your system is no longer in survival mode. From a vibrational standpoint, this is a massive upgrade. A stable internal field attracts responses instead of resistance. People, opportunities, and solutions meet you differently when you are not broadcasting tension. Inner sovereignty does not remove emotion. It organizes it. And once your inner world is organized, the outer world starts rearranging itself in ways that feel almost effortless. In the next topic, I'll explain why reality is vibrational in nature and how every problem has either an external solution or an internal one. Every problem has only two possible solutions. What if every challenge you face already comes with its solution built into it, but not always in the place you're looking? Most frustration comes from searching for an external fix to a problem that actually requires an internal shift. And the opposite is just as true. Reality operates on a simple principle. Every problem has either an external solution or an internal one. If the situation can be changed through action, strategy, or timing, then the solution is external. If it cannot be changed, at least not now, then the solution is internal. Confusion begins when you mix the two. Trying to accept what clearly requires action creates stagnation. Trying to fix what cannot be fixed creates suffering. Intelligence lies in accurate classification. This is not philosophy, it is practical mastery. When you correctly identify where the solution belongs, energy stops leaking. If action is required, you act calmly and effectively. If adaptation is required, your inner world adjusts and peace returns without denial. From a quantum perspective, this distinction keeps your vibrational field clean. You stop fighting reality. You stop forcing outcomes. And in that clarity, coherence emerges. In the next topic, I'll show you why external success without internal harmony leads to emptiness, and why the inner state always outweighs what you possess. External success alone never fulfills. Have you noticed how often people reach their goals, only to feel strangely empty afterward? This is one of the great misunderstandings of modern achievement. We are taught that fulfillment comes from accumulation, more money, more recognition, more security. But without internal harmony, success becomes weight, not freedom. The inner state always outweighs external possessions.
Why?
Because your experience of life is filtered through your nervous system, not your bank account. If the internal world is tense, fearful, or fragmented, no amount of external success can compensate. It simply amplifies what is already there. From the perspective of co-creation, this explains why some people sabotage themselves just as things improve. Expansion on the outside exposes contraction on the inside. The system seeks balance, and if harmony is missing internally, reality reorganizes to reflect that. Fulfillment is not a reward you earn later. It is a state you cultivate first. When the inner environment is aligned, calm, open, grounded, external success becomes enjoyable instead of stressful. In the next topic, I'll explain how a fulfilled life is built by consciously cultivating an internal environment of love, lightness, health, and prosperity before anything changes on the outside. The inner environment that precedes fulfillment. What if fulfillment is not something you reach, but something you host internally long before it appears externally? Most people try to build a better life by changing circumstances, yet they rarely examine the inner environment those circumstances must enter. Reality does not respond to what you want. It responds to the state you sustain. An internal environment is made of atmosphere, not events. It is the emotional climate you live in daily. Is it tense or spacious? Rushed or grounded? Defensive or receptive? This climate determines what can comfortably exist in your life. Expansion cannot settle in a contracted space. Cultivating an inner environment of love, lightness, health, and prosperity does not mean denying difficulty. It means refusing to let difficulty define the tone of your inner world. When the tone shifts, perception widens. You begin to notice possibilities that were invisible before, not because they appeared suddenly, but because your system can now register them. From a quantum perspective, the inner environment acts like a tuning field. It determines which potentials collapse into experience. When the environment is coherent, fulfillment stops feeling distant and starts feeling natural. In the next topic, I'll explain why all desired experiences already exist as potential and how expanding your internal state allows you to access them. The field of potential you are already inside. What if nothing you desire needs to be created, only accessed? This idea alone rewires how you relate to effort, timing, and trust. In quantum terms, reality is not a linear process of making things happen. It is a field of existing potential, where countless versions of outcomes already coexist. Your life does not move toward possibilities. Possibilities move toward coherence. The version of reality you experience is the one that matches your internal state. When your vibration is contracted through fear, urgency, or obsession, your access narrows. Not because opportunities disappear, but because your system cannot resonate with them. This is why forcing rarely works. Force implies absence. It signals that what you want is not here. Expansion, on the other hand, assumes presence. When your internal state expands, emotionally, perceptually, energetically, you naturally tune into broader ranges of possibility. Access is not granted by effort alone. It is granted by alignment. And alignment is felt before it is seen. When your inner state shifts, insights arrive. Synchronicities appear. Encounters feel timed rather than chased. In the next topic, I'll show you how expansion of the internal state widens perception and why opportunity often appears only after you stop hunting for it. Expansion changes what you can see. Have you ever noticed that opportunities seem to appear only after you stop obsessing over them? This isn't luck, it's perception. When your internal state expands, your field of awareness widens, and what was always present suddenly becomes visible. Contraction narrows perception. Worry, fear, and rumination lock attention onto a single threat or outcome. In that state, the mind filters out everything that does not confirm the fear. Solutions exist, but they fall outside the range you're tuned to detect. Expansion works in the opposite direction. When your nervous system relaxes and your emotional state opens, attention becomes panoramic. You begin to notice connections, timing, and subtle cues that were previously ignored. This is why people often say, "I don't know why I didn't see this before." The opportunity wasn't new, the observer was. From a co-creation standpoint, expanded perception is a gateway. It allows you to respond instead of react, to choose instead of chase. And once you're no longer hunting for results, you stop broadcasting lack. The signal changes. In the next topic, I'll explain how worry and persistent negative focus actively contract your vibrational field, and why this creates a self-reinforcing downward loop. The hidden cost of worry. What if worry isn't harmless thinking, but an active force shaping your reality? Most people treat worry as caution, responsibility, or preparation. In truth, persistent worry is a vibrational contraction that disconnects you from the very outcomes you want. Worry fixes attention on imagined futures that are emotionally charged but informationally empty. The body reacts as if the threat is real. Stress hormones rise. Muscles tense. Breathing shortens. Your system enters survival mode, and survival mode is not creative. From a quantum perspective, worry narrows the signal you broadcast. It reinforces the assumption that danger is imminent and control is absent. This doesn't cause punishment. It creates resonance. You begin attracting situations that match vigilance rather than expansion. The more you worry, the more familiar the emotional landscape becomes. And familiarity feels like truth. Over time, worry becomes identity. At that point, even good news feels unsafe because the system no longer recognizes calm as normal. In the next topic, I'll explain how persistent negative focus creates an anti-spiral, a loop that reinforces the very realities you're trying to avoid. The anti-spiral that keeps repeating your reality. What if the reason certain problems keep returning isn't fate, but focus? Persistent negative focus creates what can be called an anti-spiral, a self-reinforcing loop where attention, emotion, and expectation continuously feed the same outcomes. Here's how it works. When you focus repeatedly on what you fear, your nervous system treats that scenario as relevant. Emotion charges it. The subconscious marks it as important. And importance directs perception. You begin noticing only what confirms the fear, while anything that contradicts it fades into the background. This loop feels logical from the inside. I worry because this keeps happening. But in reality, it keeps happening because the system is tuned to recognize and recreate it. The mind calls this realism. The field experiences it as instruction. The anti-spiral is not punishment. It is repetition without awareness. The good news is that loops collapse the moment focus shifts, not through denial, but through expansion. When attention moves toward neutrality, curiosity, or openness, the loop loses fuel. In the next topic, I'll show you the essential shift that breaks this cycle, expanding your vibrational field toward fulfillment instead of contraction. The shift that breaks the cycle. What if the turning point in your life is not changing what you want, but changing the direction of your vibration? Most people try to escape contraction by fighting it, They push harder, think faster, and demand results. But contraction cannot be defeated by force. It dissolves only through expansion. Expansion means moving your internal state toward fulfillment before conditions justify it. This is where most people hesitate. They believe fulfillment must be earned after success, safety, or certainty arrives. In reality, fulfillment is a frequency, not a reward. And frequency always comes first. When your vibrational field expands through neutrality, lightness, clarity, and internal coherence, you stop feeding the anti-spiral. Attention loosens its grip on fear-based loops. Emotion softens. Perception widens. And suddenly, the same reality offers different responses. This shift is subtle, but decisive. You are no longer trying to fix life from a collapsed state. You are meeting life from a regulated, expanded one. From here, action becomes effective instead of exhausting. Waiting becomes intelligent instead of anxious. In the next topic, I'll show you how this expansion is not abstract. It is built deliberately by working the 4 pillars: beliefs, emotions, communication, and actions. Building expansion through the 4 pillars. What if expansion isn't something you wait for, but something you construct deliberately, pillar by pillar? This is where co-creation becomes practical. Expansion is not a mood. It is the cumulative effect of how you work with beliefs, emotions, communication, and actions every single day. Beliefs set the ceiling of what feels possible. If your beliefs are rooted in scarcity or limitation, expansion will feel unsafe. Emotions supply the charge. Calm, openness, and curiosity expand the field. Fear and resentment contract it. Communication aligns the system. What you repeat internally and externally tells your nervous system what reality to prepare for. And actions ground everything. They turn frequency into form. Here's the critical point. These pillars must agree with each other. You cannot think expansively, speak doubtfully, feel anxious, and act confidently, and expect coherence. Misalignment creates noise. Noise blocks manifestation. When the 4 pillars move in the same direction, expansion stabilizes. You stop oscillating between hope and collapse. Your field becomes readable to people, to opportunities, to life itself. In the next topic, I'll explain why vibrating positively in chaos is not denial, but sovereignty, and how this changes the way reality responds to you. Positive vibration in chaos is sovereignty. What if staying aligned during chaos is not naivete, but the highest form of power you can develop? Many people believe that vibrating positively in difficult moments means denying reality, pretending everything is fine, or bypassing pain. That misunderstanding keeps them trapped in reaction. Positive vibration in chaos is not emotional blindness. It is internal sovereignty. It is the decision to remain the authority of your inner world even when the outer world is unstable. You acknowledge facts without surrendering your nervous system to them. You feel emotion without letting it define you. This distinction changes everything. When chaos arises and you collapse internally, your field fragments. Fear spreads through beliefs, communication, and action. But when you remain internally aligned, chaos stays external. It becomes something you respond to, not something you become. From a quantum perspective, this is coherence under pressure. And coherence is rare. That rarity is precisely why it is powerful. Life responds differently to someone who is not broadcasting panic, resistance, or despair. This does not mean you always feel good. It means you remain centered. And from that center, your choices carry weight. Your timing improves. Your intuition sharpens. In the next topic, I'll show you how neutrality and sovereignty allow reality to reorganize itself around you, often faster than logic would predict. Reality reorganizes around inner coherence. Have you ever noticed that once you truly calm down, things begin to move, sometimes without you pushing at all? This is not coincidence. It is the natural response of reality to coherence. When your inner world stabilizes, the external world starts adjusting its behavior around you. Most people try to force change from a fragmented state. Their beliefs say one thing, their emotions say another. Their words contradict both, and their actions are reactive. Reality mirrors that confusion with delays, mixed signals, and friction, not as punishment, but as reflection. When neutrality and sovereignty are established, something subtle shifts. Your field becomes readable. Signals are no longer distorted by emotional noise. People respond more clearly. Opportunities align with less resistance. Timing feels more precise. This is why calm often precedes breakthroughs. Coherence reduces interference. And when interference drops, probability reorganizes. Paths that were blocked suddenly open. Solutions arrive through conversations, ideas, or unexpected invitations, not because you chased them, but because you were available to receive them. In the next topic, I'll explain why action taken from coherence produces disproportionate results, and why effort alone is never the deciding factor. Coherent action multiplies results. Why do some actions seem to change everything, while others, taken with far more effort, lead nowhere? The difference is not intensity. It is coherence. Action taken from an aligned internal state carries a very different signal than action taken from fear, urgency, or lack. When you act from contraction, your behavior is reactive. You push, explain too much, rush decisions, or overcompensate. Even when the action is technically correct, the field behind it is unstable. Reality responds with friction, delays, or partial results. Effort increases, but impact stays small. Coherent action works differently. It is calm, precise, and well-timed. You don't need to do more, you need to do it from the right state. From coherence, intuition guides choice. You say less, but say it clearly. You move less, but in the correct direction. And the response you receive feels disproportionate to the energy invested. From a co-creation perspective, coherence amplifies signal strength. The universe does not respond to how hard you try, it responds to how clearly you are aligned. One aligned decision can outperform months of frantic effort. In the next topic, I'll show you why consistency of internal state matters more than momentary motivation, and how stability reshapes long-term outcomes. Consistency beats motivation every time. What if the reason your results fluctuate isn't lack of ability, but lack of internal consistency? Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls. It reacts to mood, energy, and circumstances. Consistency, on the other hand, is structural. It belongs to identity, not emotion. When your internal state is inconsistent, your vibrational signal keeps changing. One day you are aligned, clear, and confident. The next you are anxious, doubtful, or reactive. Reality responds accurately by delivering unstable results. This is not failure. It is feedback. Consistency does not mean forcing positivity. It means stabilizing your inner baseline. You learn to return to coherence even when emotions fluctuate. You stop letting temporary states rewrite your self-image. And that stability creates trust, not just internally, but externally. People, opportunities, and outcomes respond to what feels reliable. From a quantum perspective, sustained frequency collapses probability more effectively than emotional spikes. A calm, repeated signal carries more authority than occasional bursts of enthusiasm. This is why small, consistent internal alignment produces greater long-term change than dramatic but short-lived effort. In the next topic, I'll explain how identity, not desire, locks in consistency, and why reality always responds to who you believe you are being. Identity is the signal reality obeys. What if reality is not responding to what you want, but to who you believe you are being? This is where most manifestation efforts quietly fail. Desire is temporary. Identity is persistent. And persistence is what reality mirrors. You can want abundance while identifying as someone who struggles. You can desire peace while identifying as someone who is constantly under pressure. In these cases, desire speaks softly, but identity speaks all the time. And reality listens to the loudest signal. Identity is not a label you choose once. It is the emotional posture you return to repeatedly. It is how you expect life to treat you when nothing special is happening. That baseline expectation shapes behavior, communication, and attention, often without conscious intent. When identity shifts, effort decreases. You stop trying to prove, chase, or defend. Your actions become congruent. Your words simplify. Your emotions stabilize. From that coherence, reality adjusts, not dramatically at first, but reliably. This is why true change feels strange before it feels comfortable. The old identity dissolves before the new one fully stabilizes. And during that transition, consistency, not reassurance, is what carries you through. In the next topic, I'll show you why patience during this transition is not passive, but a form of strategic intelligence that protects alignment. Patience is strategic, not passive. What if impatience is not urgency, but mistrust in your own alignment? Most people abandon the process right before reality reorganizes, not because nothing is happening, but because the change is occurring beneath the surface. Patience is misunderstood as waiting. In truth, patience is staying coherent while reality recalibrates. When identity shifts, the external world does not update instantly. Old structures, habits, and relationships still reflect the previous signal. This delay is not failure, it is inertia. And impatience during this phase is dangerous because it tempts you to revert to old emotional postures that feel familiar but misaligned. Strategic patience means holding the internal state steady without demanding immediate proof. It is an active stance. You continue acting, speaking, and choosing from the new identity, even when feedback lags. This is where most people self-sabotage, not by doing nothing, but by overcorrecting. From a quantum perspective, stability through delay strengthens the signal. The longer coherence is maintained without contradiction, the more authority it gains in the field. Eventually, the external world has no option but to reflect it. In the next topic, I'll explain how small contradictions in thought, speech, or action can short-circuit manifestation and how to eliminate them. The small contradictions that cancel results. What if your biggest obstacle isn't lack of effort, but tiny contradictions you barely notice? Most manifestation failures don't come from doing the wrong thing. They come from doing the right thing while simultaneously undoing it at another level. You think expansively but speak doubtfully. You visualize success but emotionally rehearse failure. You take action but narrate it internally with fear or skepticism. Each contradiction weakens the signal, not dramatically, subtly. And subtle interference is the hardest to detect because on the surface it looks like progress. But underneath, the field becomes incoherent. Reality doesn't respond clearly to mixed instructions. This is why communication is so critical. Words, tone, posture, and emotional charge must match the identity you're stabilizing. Even casual statements like, "This never works for me," or "let's see if I get lucky," quietly undermine alignment. The subconscious accepts them as instructions. The field mirrors them as uncertainty. Eliminating contradiction doesn't require perfection. It requires awareness. You begin noticing when thought, emotion, speech, and action diverge, and gently realign them. That alignment restores signal integrity. In the final topic, I'll show you how sovereignty becomes a daily practice, and how living this way transforms chaos into a training ground for mastery. Sovereignty as a daily practice. What if the purpose of chaos in your life is not to break you, but to train you? When you reach this level of understanding, something fundamental changes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "How do I choose to stand inside this?" Sovereignty is not a concept you apply once. It is a daily practice. Every day, life will test the boundary between the external world and your internal state. Every day, events will attempt to pull you into reaction, identification, or collapse. And every day, you have the same choice: surrender authority or reclaim it. This is where mastery becomes embodied. You notice contraction early. You guide emotion instead of suppressing it. You communicate consciously. You act from coherence. Over time, this stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like who you are. Chaos becomes a training ground, not a threat. Problems become signals, not enemies. And reality begins to feel responsive rather than hostile, because your inner world is no longer unstable. This is not about living without challenges. It is about living without internal captivity. And once sovereignty is established, co-creation stops being something you try to do. It becomes the way you move through life. If this perspective reshaped how you see reality, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Like the video to support this work and help it reach others ready for this shift. And share it with someone who needs to reclaim their inner authority.